Gay marriage is the law in Illinois as the veto session wraps up. Lawmakers is next.
Lawmakers is brought to you in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and through the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Lawmakers. I'm Mark McDonald at the state capitol on the last day of the fall veto session. And you can almost feel a big sigh from this building as things wrap up and sort of crank down a little bit. And Senator Andy Manar, I was going to ask you, do you feel that sort of sense of relief right now?
It's Thursday. We're still taking votes in the Senate, debating appointments right now of the governor, but it's the last day of our 6 days.
We won't see any substantial or issues-oriented things going on in the Senate today. This is sort of perfunctory business, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, it's things that typically are taken care of the last day of any session week. Important things that the Senate does, confirming agency directors, things of that nature.
Yeah.
But that's our order of business today.
It was interesting today. I don't usually go up in the gallery because I'm preparing down here, but I had some time, and so I went up in the gallery to see what was going on in the Senate. They had just called the Senate to session, and who gives the invocation today but Jesse Jackson Sr. I was surprised.
Yeah, I had a good conversation with him. He of course has some pretty strong ties to Springfield and to Decatur, and there were some individuals that I'm proud to represent in the state Senate with him, accompanying him today. So we had a good chat before session started.
Yeah. Speaking of, you mentioned Decatur, of course that's part of your district. Earlier, a couple of months ago, ADM came out with the news that they were looking for a global headquarters away from Decatur. That was going to mean a minimum of 100 jobs moving, and possibly in the future many more than that, because you know how headquarters are when you kind of want to move your body of folks in there. You did what you could do to sort of to keep them in the state. Where does that stand, and what's going on?
Yeah, it was about a month ago, Mark. ADM announced that they were moving 100 jobs from Decatur. Their preference at that time was to move to Chicago, and they cited any number of reasons as to why they felt that was a good move for the company. And they said to people such as myself and to city officials and the people of Decatur that this will be good for Decatur by default. We will grow as a company, and that by default will grow jobs in Decatur. So having been through many conversations last session about tax credits and how difficult these things can be, and sometimes not good for taxpayers of the state, I took a pretty strong opposing position to what ADM was asking for at that time in the House. And what I tried to do was to say, we believe you when you say you will grow as a company, but we want assurances that that's the case before we consider a tax credit program for you to do that. So over the course of about 4 weeks, the City of Decatur officials, the Mayor Mike McElroy and I, and the Chamber of Commerce and others met, and we came up with a proposal which has been filed and passed out of the Executive Committee in the Senate now, and it's a job creation bill for Decatur. It'll produce 500 new positions in Decatur, or hire 500 new positions in Decatur at their facilities over the course of 5 years, and it will import 100 jobs from other ADM facilities somewhere else in the country to Decatur. So that's 600 jobs in 5 years. And it will also keep, which is important, ADM's world headquarters in the state, presumably in Chicago. And this is a unique bill. And I made this case to the Executive Committee yesterday that we don't oftentimes consider bills that create jobs in Chicago and in downstate. So I would say this is a one-of-a-kind thing to say, jobs and job creation bills should be balanced between parts of the state that are typically pitted against each other. And we've seen that over and over again in this place. And our goal was to say, ADM is valuable to this state, ADM is valuable to Decatur. Let's put those two things in a piece of legislation, and let's take that under consideration.
Now, in exchange for ADM making these promises, of course, they have to get something in return.
Yeah.
And what would that be?
They would receive what's called an EDGE tax credit, which is the current law today, and it would qualify the company, providing they meet the criteria that I just outlined, for that tax credit. And we've had a very robust debate over the last year about how these credits should work, and I think we should have a more robust debate about that. What I've tried to do in this legislation is to say we should raise the bar on how corporations qualify for EDGE credits. And in this case, moving jobs, which was the original proposal, moving jobs from one community in the state, which happens to have very high unemployment, to another is not a win for the state. That might be a win for one part of the state, but it's not a win for the state as a whole. So we have said in this bill, if you're going to do that, and it's going to help you grow as a company, and it's going to help our economy grow as a state, then you have to minimally make sure that the jobs that you're vacating are filled with jobs from other states. And we took it a step further and said you need to commit to a 5-year plan to create more jobs in Decatur. That to me is worth a credit. If you're going to create that number of jobs, hundreds of jobs in the places in the state, in this case, with the highest unemployment, then to me that is a balanced approach, and that's why I'm going to hopefully, the next time we have the opportunity to take a vote, I'm going to ask my colleagues in the Senate to approve that.
This would be, I've read, $24 million in tax credits for ADM.
Yeah, that's an estimate. You know, the details of these credits are worked out between the administration and the company. The legislation is authorizing this with criteria. That's the important part, with criteria on how an agreement would take place. So it would be somewhere around 25
So it got out of a Senate committee. It has not gone before the entire Senate yet. You expect that in January?
I would expect that in January. What was important to me was the executive committee yesterday. The bill was presented. It was supported by the city of Decatur. It was supported by ADM. And there was very little debate because I think that's just indicative of how balanced this bill is, which is markedly different from where it was in the House a month ago when it was introduced, and where many of these other EDGE credits have gone. And I credit the company and I credit local officials for working together and saying this is a solution that's good for Decatur.
We got some good news from COGFA recently. They said that they anticipate their revenues to be $369 million higher than they anticipated for fiscal 13. That, of course, is good news. You had some ideas about how some of that money should be used as a supplemental appropriation to pay back pay for union employees who were promised increases that they didn't get.
Yeah, we first of all, I think we should start by recognizing that it's a good thing when the legislature, in this case through COGFA, which is the nonpartisan group that does revenue estimates for us, took a conservative approach to revenues for the budget this year. That's a good thing, and that means we're not going to begin overspending on day one. Because revenues should match expenditures, which was accomplished in the budget last year. But at the same time, when we get good news like this, we shouldn't just say, let's open the checkbook up for stuff. You know, we should be disciplined about this. And one of the things I've introduced in the Senate is that I view back wages to state workers as an unpaid bill. These are contractual obligations that we need to just get behind us, in my opinion. Because this is a hurdle that we should have overcome last spring, in my opinion. And if you recall, when we debated the supplemental last spring, I didn't vote for that bill for this reason, and for the reason that it wasn't addressing the proration of general state aid, which resulted in 6,000 teachers being laid off across the state by May. And those two things, to me, not being met didn't deserve my support. This supplemental now, that's working its way through both chambers, does not include the back pay. But I'm hopeful that we can convince the members of the General Assembly that this is no different than any other unpaid bill in state government. And we have to get this right. There's no reason why we shouldn't just deal with this and put this behind us and bring the certainty to the people that earn the money in state government, that work hard, that we're contractually obligated to pay, and we should just get this behind us once and for all.
Well, they're going to be waiting for a while now because if there is not a special session in December, and there's talk about that, and if it waits until January for the next budgeting process, then you're talking about these folks not getting paid till next summer.
It could, and keep in mind, we're racking up interest on this as the further this goes along. And again, this to me, it's very logical. We have revenues that are outpacing expenditures, which is a good thing, and we should be disciplined about what we use that for. And back wages that are contractually obligated are an unpaid bill that affect people's lives, and to me that is first and foremost what we should do.
Yeah. One of the axes that got thrown into this, of course, is now that concealed carry is the law in Illinois, that has to be implemented. You never implement a new law without some money. So the state police, of course, needs some of the supplemental appropriation, which is biting into what you would like to give for back pay.
Yeah, it's part of the same conversation. The concealed carry appropriations that need to happen for the state police to administer the new law, which is a major shift in state law, one that I supported, are fee-based funds. So those are funds that are based on fees, but obviously it needs to get started. So absent of that appropriation, we can't administer the law that was debated in full and crafted very carefully last session. So that's very important because we don't want to get behind on that.
For years, we have been talking about pension reform and how are we going to dig ourselves out of our $100 billion hole. And once again, we get through another special session without any pension reform. We keep hearing, well, we need actuarial information and we need the committees to meet again and we'll get, but people's patience is running very thin on this. Do you happen to know what the hang-up issues are on this?
Well, I think the good thing that we've seen so far is that the conference committee process, albeit interpreted as cumbersome by many, I think has worked well. Because people are sharing ideas in an open setting. What I would have liked to seen a little bit more of is inclusion of individuals or representatives of individuals whose lives are going to be affected by any changes we make in a pension reform bill, any changes. That to me needs to be a little more of the discussion. And the last time I was on the show, I referenced the bill that I supported in the Senate, House Bill 2404, which was a negotiated bill. It was a negotiation process that led to a piece of legislation that, in my mind, if we're going to make changes, which we have to do this, there's no question about that in my mind, but the changes that we make have to have the input of people that are going to be affected. And we saw in 2404 that there can be a compromise made. And I think that's the basis of any discussion going forward. And I go right back to that bill we passed in the Senate last May, which was significant, which was much more constitutional than any other proposal we saw, that was negotiated, that represented an outcome that most people, I think, could agree to. There were some that dissented, without question, but for the most part, it took a very difficult issue and put it in a very good piece of legislation. So I would use that as a basis of anything moving forward.
On the first day of this special session, I think most people were surprised when the gay marriage bill came up for a vote in the House and it passed. And one of the reasons it passed is because they changed the effective date on it, so it no longer needed 71 votes, it needed only 60. It got one more vote than it needed. And of course, you were probably glad to see that because I think you voted for it.
I did, and I did. I voted for it, voted for the bill last February. And the date change happens quite a bit actually during veto session because of the constitutional requirements of when bills take effect. But I said this on your show earlier too. The original bill that was in the Senate I would not have supported, but the sponsor in the Senate, Senator Staines, worked very well with not just myself but other members of the Senate to address concerns. And in my mind, religious freedom and freedom to practice religion is equally as important as, in this case, marriage equality. And those two things, I don't believe need to conflict. And I believe the bill that was passed by the Senate, eventually by the House, addresses those concerns. The original bill did not, to my standard, but the bill that I voted for in the Senate did meet those concerns, which is why I supported it.
Well, thank you very much for taking your time off the Senate floor, and I hope you didn't miss any votes.
I think I heard two bells there during the few minutes. But
that you could hustle back.
Yeah,
then, huh?
Very good.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mark.
And we will be back with more Lawmakers in just a moment.
please take the record. On this question, there are 61 voting yes, 54 voting no, 2 voting present, and this bill, having received a constitutional majority, is hereby declared passed.
And that was a bit of the action earlier this week on Tuesday when the gay marriage vote passed the House. And of course, it had passed the Senate too. Earlier, they had to go back to the Senate because there was a date change. Senator John Sullivan from Rushville, thank you for joining us and taking time out from some executive votes that you're doing in there today.
Right.
The meat of this veto session is over. You
Right.
guys are cleaning up, doing some housekeeping. While we're talking about gay marriage, how did you vote on that vote?
I did not support it. And tell you what, Mark, is probably one of the toughest decisions that I've had to make since being here in Springfield, because obviously, you know, the proponents and the people that support it are very passionate about that issue, and certainly I know a number of people, as we all do, that are gay, and you know, it's just it's been a very personal struggle with me to make this decision. But to me, it kind of came down to the bottom line is that I ran a campaign last year. Folks asked me where I stood on this issue. I told them that I was not supportive of it because I represent a very conservative district, and overwhelmingly convinced that the people that reside in the district are not supportive of that. And so it's my job to represent the district. So, but it was a very tough decision.
Yeah, you personally, you struggle with certain things, and I know if I were a legislator, I'd have the same issues. Who do I represent my own interests or those of my district?
Yeah.
And it's a constant struggle, isn't
it? It's not a constant struggle, but it's certainly on some of these on the toughest issues. It always is one of those things that sometimes you're just torn, and you want to do what's the right thing to do, but that's not always very clear. It's not always a black and white. There's gray areas, and so you have to make a decision. And I made a decision that I was hired to represent my district, and that was the decision that I needed to make.
We talked to Senator Manar earlier about tax credits for Illinois companies who are moving, and maybe they'll take employees with them if they go. And he, of course, has a keen interest in this because he represents Decatur, where
Right.
ADM lives and where this is happening. From your viewpoint, even though it's not in your district, are tax credits for big business a good idea?
They're a mixed bag. I mean, the ADM situation is kind of unique, right? They want to move their corporate headquarters from Decatur up to the city of Chicago. How do you give them an incentive to do that? So as it started out, I know Senator Manar has worked on that legislation to tweak it and to put some other incentives in there to create some additional jobs. But when we get into a situation, if we look at this statewide, and we have companies that are coming into Illinois, and we have companies that are leaving Illinois, and all these states are trying to bring in new businesses and attract and steal companies away from other states. If we do nothing, if we offer no incentives and just let kind of the cards fall where they may, there's going to be companies that are going to leave because other states are working very hard offering incentives to have them come. So I think we have to do something. I think the question is do we do a piecemeal approach like we're doing right now, by special legislation for these companies that want to do this, or do we, and there's some discussion about this, do we create a plan to say, okay, here's the criteria, here's the checklist, here's what if you want to stay here, if you want to create new jobs, if you want to move here, here's the checklist. Everybody kind of plays by the same set of rules instead of this special legislation. I think that's what has got a lot of folks very upset. So if we do this for ADM, well, what are we going to do for Caterpillar or
what is to keep
another ethanol producing plant in the
okay,
state?
what can we get out of the state if we threaten to move an office or
now they're playing one against the other, right? I don't think there's any way to avoid that, but because the other states are, they're working very hard as well. So it certainly would be nice if we could come up with some middle ground on it. But I think I certainly want to compliment Andy Manar on the work that he's done with the additional jobs that would be created out of that legislation. So.
Coming up with some common ground, let's talk about the pension reform issue again, because it seems to be something that we just can't agree on. And it seems like we're always waiting for, there will be more information that will come in that will help us make these decisions. But I don't know, Senator, I think people are getting quite impatient about it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. And yet, I still don't think that we want to make Senate Bill 1 pass. Let's use that as an example. It passed, and they said it was going to save X number of dollars. Well, they were $20 billion off. And that's because they didn't wait for the actuaries to really give them the facts and the accurate figures. So we don't want to do something unless that information is correct, and it takes time to do that. Now, have we put it off, and have we put it off? Yes, we have, but I think it's important, if we do it, that it's done properly, and at least we have the correct numbers to work with. That being said, what's going to happen, as I stand here today, I think that we're going to be back probably the first part of December. We'll have all that information, and I think that there will be a vote early in December on this issue.
Okay. And do you think the pension reform will be the reason we're coming back in December?
I think that will be one of them. I think that we could also, some of these incentive packages could be ready by that time as well. There's about a half a dozen other issues that are kind of hanging out there that really need to be acted upon, if they're going to be acted upon, by late December, early January. So that's why I think that will be another reason that we could come back and take a look at some legislation as well. What we've done is kind of given some of the different groups that are interested in some of this legislation time to work out a compromise. For example, on the ADW, the Advanced Deposit Wagering Bill, it affects horse racing in the state of Illinois. They're very close, but they haven't come up with an agreement. We're going to try to give them a little more time. If not, then I think they're going to feel the consequences of that.
What's your overall assessment of this special session, these 6 days that you all have been in?
It's been busy. It just seems like I've been kind of running and going, and we've moved, quite a few bills, but the big issues have not been addressed. I mean, yes, we've done some legislation. We're probably voting on 20 or 30 bills today. That's a fairly active day. But obviously the big issues are still outstanding, with the exception of the marriage equality. That was probably the biggest thing that happened here during the session as far as those big outstanding issues. But obviously the pensions, we still have to come back and fix that.
Right. And you have heard, or you believe that the first week of December is the likely time when that will happen?
I think we have to look at schedules. We have to see who's available. There's legislators could have vacations planned or whatever, so we have to look at everybody's schedule, but I would anticipate us coming back early in December.
Okay. After get Thanksgiving behind you and before Christmas gets too close, then squeeze it in there, huh?
Right.
Good news on the economic front for Illinois. We haven't had that in many years, where COGFA is telling us that we are probably going to have more revenue than we thought we were going to have. It's good news, isn't it?
Yeah. $370 million. Obviously, it is good news. Now, the question is, what do we do with that money? There was a supplemental appropriation bill that's been floating around both chambers to spend a portion of that money. That actually is not going to happen, not today or not over the course. We did pass a supplemental, but it really didn't affect a GRF. It was more kind of a reappropriation or giving some authority to spend some money within different agency budgets. But certainly a good thing. Now the discussion is, what are we going to do with that money? Do we want to use it to pay down the backlog of unpaid bills, which is still an outstanding huge issue? Do we want to use it to pay, the courts have said that this back pay for state employees,
right,
we're supposed to pay that. There hasn't been an agreement to do that. So again, there's nothing on fire on that. I mean, we didn't have to do something on it right now, but we do have some additional revenue that we would have the opportunity to appropriate.
Yeah, there is a faction that would like to see us adopt a graduated income tax. And that would be sort of like a federal income tax, where those who make less money pay a lower percentage of their income in taxes than others, than the higher earners. Do you think that's a lively debate that could actually go somewhere?
Well, yes, I do. Because of another event that's going to happen at the end of next year, and that's the sunset of the tax increase that went in effect 2-3 years ago, right? So it's going to be very interesting next spring when Governor Quinn has to introduce a budget for the next fiscal year. And he can only project revenues based on what is in law now. So this sunset of this tax increase is going to sunset at the end of December of next year. So he will have a half year's revenue from that tax increase to work with. He can't we don't believe that he can introduce a budget, anticipating that there will be an extension of it or something else. So he's going to have to put together a budget with about $5 billion less revenue than he has to work with. That's what when the tax increase sunsets, that's what we're going to lose, is about $5 billion. So half of that, about $2.5 billion, is going to be, he's not going to have that revenue to work with outside of the budget. So it's going to be interesting to see how he puts that together. I had a group of educators I met with the other day, and they said, John, can we anticipate some more revenues to fill in some of the cuts that we've seen over the years? And I said, folks, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but here's the reality of what we have to work with. If nothing changes, we're in for some really, really difficult times ahead.
Wow, getting that renewed for another 3 years, or a different tax structure altogether, that'd be a battle.
Well, that would be and where we started with this conversation was this graduated tax. Right. So I've been studying, obviously my district borders Missouri and Iowa. Both states have a graduated income tax. Yeah. I've been studying the Iowa plan a lot. If we had the tax structure, the income tax structure that Iowa had, we would literally have billions of dollars of more revenue to work with. So, it's not all the states are on this level playing field, and of course you can't look at just one tax, but it's certainly going to be a big discussion over the course of I'd say the course of next year there's going to be a lot of discussion about it.
Okay. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, good to be here, Mark.
Okay.
As always.
And if Senator Sullivan is right, we will be back here the first week or so of December. And if that in fact bears out, we'll bring you another Lawmakers at that time. This has been Mark McDonald with Lawmakers. Thanks for watching.
Lawmakers is brought to you in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and through the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.